My name is Claire Whitmore, and I heard my sister's voice 20 years after we buried her memory behind a locked door. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story, because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It started 3 nights ago, at exactly 3:12 a.m. I had fallen asleep on the sofa again, a habit that had grown roots in recent years. The television was off, but the faint glow from the streetlight outside shimmered on the polished hardwood floor. Everything was still, almost, until I heard it. The voice came from the end of the hallway, low, familiar, tremulous. Claire. I bolted upright. My chest tightened as if the name didn't belong to me anymore. It came again. Claire, open the door. The door. That door. The one at the end of the hall. The room no one had entered in 20 years. The room where my sister Anna had vanished without a trace. I didn't move. I barely breathed. My body knew what my mind refused to accept. That voice had no right to exist. Not anymore. Not since that night. It wasn't the first time I had thought I heard her. Over the years, grief has a way of bleeding into memory and memory into madness. But this was different. Because this time the door handle moved. A slow rattle. Not forced, not violent, but like someone testing it from the other side. Someone who wasn't afraid. Someone who had waited long enough. I stood, my legs cold and stiff from sleep, and crept down the hallway like a child afraid of her own house. The closer I got, the louder the sound became, not the voice anymore, but breathing. Wet, shallow, and rhythmic. It stopped as I reached the doorknob. The silver handle, dulled by time, had always been warm to the touch. I reached out, hesitated, then pulled my hand back. My fingers trembled. Not tonight, I whispered to myself. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the door until I returned to the living room, locked the hallway door behind me, and turned on every light in the house. 20 years. That's how long I've lived alone in this house. My ex-husband Michael left after the 5th year. Said he couldn't take it anymore, the way I froze up every time someone mentioned Anna, how I refused to change anything in the house. How I locked one room and acted like it was a crime scene. We fought. Oh, we fought. He told me the past was a weight I chose to carry, but he didn't understand. He wasn't there the night she disappeared. I was 17. She was 12. A thunderstorm had rolled in fast that evening, like someone had torn the sky in half. Our parents were out of town. Anna had been acting strange all day, distant, whispering to herself, laughing at things that weren't funny. At one point, she stood in the hallway outside that very room and said, "He wants to come in now." I thought she was joking, playing the kind of game little sisters play when they crave attention. But that night, she went into the room and never came out. I searched the entire house, every closet, every crawl space. I even ran into the woods screaming her name. The police found nothing. No fingerprints, no struggle, no broken windows. The door was locked from the inside. The only person who had the key was me. And yet somehow she was gone. My parents never forgave me, not entirely, and I never forgave myself. I called my son the next morning. He didn't answer. We hadn't spoken in months, ever since I told him not to bring his wife into the house. "She's pregnant, Mom," he said last time. "I'm sorry, but not this house. Not until—" "It's safe," I'd whispered. He hung up on me. I don't blame him. But I needed someone to tell me I wasn't losing it. Someone to say, "Yes, I hear it too." So I called Evelyn, my oldest friend, the only one who hadn't written me off as the haunted widow of Hemlock Street. "Claire," she said, "you need rest. You're not sleeping. You're not eating. You're still grieving." But I heard her. "It's your mind, sweetie. Guilt is loud." I hung up. Not out of anger, but because I knew she was right, and that terrified me. Because if this was all in my head, I couldn't trust myself anymore. And if it wasn't, then something else was coming for me. That night, I left the hallway light on. I placed the old skeleton key on the kitchen counter and told myself, if I hear her again, I'll open the door. But part of me hoped I wouldn't. I sat in the silence, listening to the house breathe. And at 3:12 a.m. the voice came again. This time it was closer. Claire, let me out. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen blinds, but it didn't warm me. Not really. I hadn't slept. I'd sat upright in the armchair all night, key in hand, watching the hallway through a sliver in the door. Like a coward. Like a sentinel. But I hadn't gone to the room. Because no matter how familiar that voice sounded, I remembered what happened 20 years ago. That room wasn't just where Anna disappeared. It was where she changed. People always ask why I didn't move out. Why I didn't remodel or sell the house after Michael left after the rumors began. Why I didn't try to start over. But you don't abandon the place that holds the last answer you'll ever need. You don't destroy the only witness left. The truth was in that room, and if I ignored it long enough, it would speak. I just didn't expect it to call my name. Back then, the house looked the same. Same faded wallpaper with green vines. Same dark oak floors that creaked in all the wrong spots. Same chipped stair banister we used to slide down when our parents were out. But there was a time when the house felt alive with laughter, our laughter. Anna used to sing. Loudly, badly, with a toothbrush as a microphone. I was annoyed by it, but I'd give anything to hear her voice now, really hear it, not the ghosted fragments drifting through drywall. She was obsessed with that room. She called it her museum of secrets. She'd take her dolls in there and say she was teaching them stories. The window was small, the air stale, and the light barely reached the back wall. It had a slanted ceiling and an old toy chest in the corner left from the previous owners. But 1 week before she disappeared, she started locking it from the inside. "I'm protecting it," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Protecting what I'd asked." She tilted her head. "The thing that talks to me. He gets lonely when I'm not there." I slapped her arm like a sister does when she thinks you're just being weird to mess with her. I thought it was imagination. Pretend. But one night I stood outside the door, and I heard something answer her back. Not words, not clear ones, but something like breathing, clicking, wet swallowing. I told myself it was the house settling. After she vanished, the police asked 1,000 questions. Where was I? In my room asleep. Did she run away? No shoes were missing? Did she have enemies? She was 12. Then they focused on the room. The door was locked from the inside. There were no signs of forced entry. No exits. No broken windows. Just nothing. And the key. The key had been under my pillow. Even now, I can feel the memory of that cold iron pressing into my neck as I woke to sirens and shouting. I didn't tell the police I had it. I didn't want to admit I'd taken it. I'd hidden it 2 days earlier after Anna whispered, "He says he wants to keep me." Who was he? No one asked that question. They looked at me like I was confused, traumatized. But I remember her face the last time I saw her. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor of that room, humming something, tuneless eyes fixed on the corner. "You'll hear me again," she said as I walked away that night. "I promise." Last night wasn't the only time I heard her. Over the years, the voice came in waves. On my wedding day. On my son's 5th birthday. On the night my mother died whispering nonsense in her fever. But it always came from behind that locked door. Always at the same hour. 3:12 a.m. My therapist once said it was trauma imprinting itself on my circadian rhythm. That grief can become habit. That hallucinations are our mind's way of releasing suppressed guilt. But how do you explain the footprints? Tiny bare footprints that appear on the wood floor beneath the hallway light, always facing the living room. Like someone or something is still trying to come out. This morning, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I stood outside the room and pressed my ear to the door. Silence. Then a scratching. Soft. Deliberate. Like a child's fingernail tracing the inside of the wood. Claire, the voice came again. It's safe now. My stomach twisted. Because that's what Anna used to say when we were kids. When I was afraid of the basement, of storms, of being alone. It's safe now. Only this time I didn't believe her. I didn't want to believe whatever was behind that door could be her. I dropped the key again on the counter and paced the kitchen like a prisoner. Then I opened the hallway closet and pulled out the box. The one marked Anna, do not open. It had followed me from attic to attic. I never looked inside after the funeral, not really. The police had returned her things, clothes, books, drawings, all too painful to face. But now I had to. At the bottom of the box was a notebook, her diary. Most of it was childish scribbles, crayon rainbows, secret crushes. But then I flipped to the final page. Written in trembling pencil, it read, "He promised I could come back if I stayed quiet long enough. 20 years isn't long for him." I dropped the book. My hands shook. My throat tightened. The clock on the microwave blinked. 3:11 a.m. I turned. The hallway door was open a crack, and the voice whispered, "You read it. Now come see." The door was ajar, just a thin slice like a wound on the house itself. I froze, staring at it from across the living room. The key was still on the counter untouched. I hadn't opened that door. I would have sworn on my own life that I hadn't even gone near it. But it was open, and the smell drifted out, a faint sweetness like rotting flowers mixed with dust, something my memory knew but my mind couldn't place. My first instinct, run. Leave the house, call someone, anyone. But I didn't. Instead, I walked toward it. Slow. Every creak of the floorboards was like a gunshot in the silence. As I got closer, I heard breathing again. But this time, it wasn't just one voice. It was a soft murmur, a conversation. Whispers curling in the air like smoke. Not yet. She's listening. Almost time. I reached the door, my pulse slamming in my ears. My fingers hovered over the edge of the wood, ready to push it open. But I didn't. Because I remembered the last time I was in that room. It was the day after Anna disappeared. I was 17, barely old enough to hold myself together, while the entire town whispered about me, about what I might have done to my sister. The police had already combed through the room, dusting every inch, tearing up the carpet, even unscrewing the old toy chest. Nothing. No blood, no hair, no fibers. Just emptiness. When they left, I snuck in at night. I wanted to feel close to her, to see if I could understand what had happened. But when I stepped in, I swore I heard humming. Not loud, not in my head. Humming coming from the walls. I pressed my ear to the floor, to the toy chest, to the thin cracks near the window. And then I felt something. The toy chest moved. I screamed. Ran. Locked the door behind me and threw the key into my drawer. I told myself it was stress. Shock. Nothing real. But that was the moment I decided the room wasn't safe. Now, 20 years later, that decision felt like it was unraveling. The whispers were louder. A chill rolled out of the doorway, brushing against my face like icy fingers. "Claire," the voice crooned. This time, it wasn't pleading. It was happy, like it knew I was there. I backed away. My heel hit the wall and I nearly dropped the key again. "I can't," I whispered. I slammed the hallway door shut, locked it, and shoved the key into the drawer. But I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the front window, watching shadows move across the floor as the hours crawled by. My heart never slowed. Morning came like an insult. The sunlight felt fake, like the house was wearing a mask. I tried to keep busy, making coffee, folding laundry, pretending life was normal. But every time I walked past the hallway, my throat tightened. Finally, I decided I needed to know. I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. I grabbed my phone, turned on the voice recorder, and set it by the hallway door before bed. I left the house lights on, all of them, and waited. At exactly 3:12 a.m., I heard it. Not with my ears, but through the phone's speaker. A soft sing-song whisper. Ring around the rosy. Claire will let me in. My body went rigid, because Anna used to sing that song, over and over, until it became a nervous habit. I hit stop on the recording and replayed it. The voice wasn't just singing, it was laughing. The next morning, I tried calling my son again. He didn't answer. Left another voicemail. Evan, it's Mom. Just call me back, okay? Something's happening here. I don't want to scare you, but I'm scared. I deleted the message. I couldn't drag him into this. Not after how I'd treated his wife. Not after how distant we'd grown. By noon, I found myself standing outside the room again. The key was in my pocket. I stared at the door handle. All I had to do was turn it. One twist and I'd know if there was anything inside. If if something of her was still here. I placed my hand on the knob. Cold. Too cold. Like metal left in snow. I turned it. The door didn't budge. It wasn't locked. I had unlocked it, but something was holding it shut from the other side. Something that pushed back just enough to make my skin crawl. Then, through the thin crack between the door and the frame, a voice said, "Not yet. Wait for tonight." I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet. That night, I dreamed of Anna. She was standing in the room, her back to me, hair tangled, her voice low. "He doesn't like when you wait," she said. "He's been waiting longer than you think." When I woke up, my fingernails were dirty, like I'd clawed something in my sleep. My sheets were damp with sweat. And on my nightstand was a single drawing. Anna's drawing. A stick figure of two girls. One smiling, one crying. And beneath it, written in her handwriting, "Stop locking me in." I'm starting to think this house doesn't want me to leave. Or maybe it wants me to remember. The footsteps started that night. I wasn't dreaming. I know the sound of this house like I know my own heartbeat. I know how it settles. I know the clicks of the radiators, the sighs of the windows. I know the moan of the hallway when you walk too close to the edge. But these were footsteps. Deliberate. Measured. Padded, not the click of shoes, but the sound of bare feet slapping gently against wood. They started at the back of the hallway near the locked room and moved slowly forward. One step. Pause. Two steps. Pause. Breathing. Then nothing. I clutched the blanket to my chest and sat motionless on the couch. I hadn't turned off the lights that night, and thank God I hadn't, because the hallway was lit and empty. But I could hear the steps. And then the doorknob turned again. Slowly. The door didn't open. But the brass handle moved with a delicate, thoughtful twist, like a child trying not to wake her parents. I whispered aloud, without meaning, to Anna. The handle froze. Then from behind the door, a quiet giggle. I didn't sleep. I couldn't even blink properly. When dawn finally crept over the windowsill, I stood, legs trembling, and walked to the hallway. The air was ice. Not just cold wrong. And there, in the soft layer of dust near the locked door, were footprints. Small. Bare. Leading away from the room. But they didn't lead to the living room or the stairs. They led to the basement door. And that door was open. The basement had always been the one place I avoided after Anna's disappearance. The police checked it, of course. Nothing had been found. But I remember Anna's voice the last day I saw her whole. She had tugged on my arm and said, "He says he lives under us. That's where the cold is." I never understood what she meant. But standing at the top of those basement stairs now, decades later, I finally knew. The air down there was still. Not dead, just listening. I flipped on the light switch. It flickered once, then went out. Burnt bulb. Of course. I stepped down anyway, holding my phone light ahead of me. It cast a narrow cone across the old cement floor, sweeping over boxes and furniture draped in sheets. I told myself this was stupid, that I was being led by fear. Until I saw the wall. In the back corner beneath an old sewing table, a small square section of the wall had been scraped clean. The rest of the cinder block was covered in dust and mildew, but this part looked recent, the edges raw, and on it, written in a child's hand, "Don't let her out." Below the writing was a drawing, a crude stick figure with a huge dark circle for a head, and next to it a second stick figure trapped in a box. Something shifted behind me. A creak. I turned fast, the phone light darting across shadows. Nothing. But when I turned back, there was something else on the wall. I hadn't seen it before, a small metal hook nailed into the brick. And hanging from it was a cassette tape. I don't own a tape player anymore. Who does? But I knew exactly where to find one. My father's study was still preserved on the second floor just as he left it. I hadn't gone in there since his funeral, but the door wasn't even locked. Just stiff with time. Dust covered everything, his framed degrees, the cracked leather chair, the globe I used to spin when I was bored. I found the cassette player in the top desk drawer, exactly where it had always been. The battery compartment had corroded, but I plugged it into the wall and hoped it still worked. The tape clicked into place. I pressed play. At first, only static. Then a voice. His voice. My father's. Calm, quiet, serious. "If you're hearing this, it means the door opened again." A pause. Then God forgive me. I froze. We should have never let her play in that room. I told Margaret it wasn't just a phase. She knew what was coming through. We all felt it. A shaky breath. She wasn't our Anna anymore. Not really. She remembered things she couldn't know. She spoke in voices I didn't recognize. My stomach turned to ice. Then a rustling on the tape. Footsteps. A child's laugh. He whispered. She's standing in front of me now. Staring. Waiting. More static. Then a final word. Don't let her out. Then a scream. Male. Abrupt. Cut off mid-breath. The tape stopped. I didn't realize I was crying until I tasted the salt on my lips. I ran downstairs, unplugged the cassette player, and threw it into the trash. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Because for the first time, I realized the truth wasn't just about losing Anna. It was about what we let in. That night, I locked every door and window. I turned off all the lights and sat in the dark holding the diary, waiting. At 3:12 a.m., the door opened again. And this time, I heard two voices. One was Anna's. The other whispered in a language I didn't understand, but it wasn't meant for me. It was meant for something else. And it was already inside the house. I didn't sleep. After the door opened again, I waited until morning to move. I sat in the armchair wrapped in a blanket like armor, eyes locked on the hallway, though the door had silently clicked shut again at some point during the night. When the sun rose, I forced myself up. Not to run, not to call anyone, not to pretend life was normal. No, I needed to search. Not for ghosts or shadows, but for something I could hold in my hands. A letter, a truth, anything. Because whatever I had been afraid of 20 years ago, it wasn't just a memory. I started in the hallway. The section of floor outside Anna's room was always a bit warped. Back then, our father blamed it on moisture damage. But Anna once told me something different. She was sitting cross-legged, hugging a stuffed bear with no eyes, and she said, "There's something under the house. It watches through the cracks." I had laughed. Now I wasn't laughing. I got down on my knees and ran my fingers along the edge of each floorboard. They were old, darkened with time, but one plank near the baseboard was looser than the others. I pressed on it. It gave a little. So I fetched a screwdriver and slowly pried it up. Underneath was a shallow compartment. Dust mostly. A dead spider. But then, a bundle of folded paper tied together with red thread. I stared at it like it might bite me. My hands trembled as I lifted it out. The paper was yellowed, stained in places, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Anna's. But these letters weren't written before she disappeared. They were dated after. The first was dated 6 days after the night she vanished. Dear Claire, I'm sorry I scared you. I didn't mean to stay this long, but he won't let me leave yet. He says the world outside is sharp and I'm not ready. The room is different now, bigger than before. Sometimes it moves, sometimes it laughs. I miss you, but I'm not alone here. He brings me things, toys, chalk, shadows. Don't worry, I'm not afraid when he's happy. That last line made my throat close. When he's happy. I turned the page. The second letter was worse. Claire, time doesn't work here. I only sleep when he sings. But when I wake, I see things. Old things. You. Grown up. Crying. Alone. He showed me our house, but it's empty. I don't want that. I want you to come in. I want us to play again. He says we can. All you have to do is open the door. I dropped the paper. My breath hitched. This wasn't grief. This wasn't a game of pretend. She was describing visions, things that hadn't happened yet. Me crying alone. This house now. Exactly as I was. Had she really written these? Or had something else? I read all 12 letters. They spanned decades. The handwriting changed subtly like a child aging in ink. At first playful, then hesitant. Then, in the last one, detached. Claire. He says the room will let me out when you stop being afraid. He says it feeds on waiting. I told him you still love me. He laughed. Then he made me laugh too. He's not so bad once you stop asking questions. That was the last letter. No signature. I sat on the floor, the bundle in my lap, trying to quiet the storm in my chest. This wasn't just about loss anymore. It was about influence, about infection. That room didn't take her. It kept her, changed her. Maybe slowly, maybe lovingly, maybe completely. I took the letters into the kitchen, scanned them under brighter light. Each page was marked with a faint symbol in the top right corner like a spiral made of thorns. I didn't recognize it, but I'd seen it before, on the toy chest, on her old drawings, and now, scratched faintly into the door's wood. It wasn't Anna's symbol. It was his. Later that day, I called Evelyn again. She answered on the third ring. Claire, she asked, her voice tired. You sound off. Worse than before. I found letters. From Anna. Silence. You're sure they're real? I told her about the handwriting, the dates, the spiral. I could hear her breathing, slow and deliberate. I shouldn't say this, she whispered finally, but I remember your mother once said something strange. What do you mean? She told me years after Anna vanished that you weren't supposed to be the one left behind. My blood ran cold. What she said it while she was sedated near the end. It was supposed to be Claire, she mumbled. Then she cried herself to sleep. That night I couldn't eat, couldn't think. I sat by the hallway, letters in my lap, the key in my hand. What had they done? What had I done? The only thing I could do was ask the one being who might know the truth. So at 3:12 a.m. I unlocked the door, and I opened it. The door opened with a sigh. Not a creak, a sigh. Like the room itself was exhaling after 20 years of holding its breath. The smell hit me first. It wasn't decay or mildew. It was the scent of old paper-dried flowers, something sweet and bitter tangled together, like memory. And it was warm. That surprised me. I'd always expected cold, a chill, an unnatural presence. But the air was thick, heavy, with a heat that clung to the back of my neck. I stepped inside. The room was exactly as we'd left it. A narrow bed with a faded quilt. A bookshelf of children's novels. The old wooden toy chest. Anna's drawings still taped to the wall, bright crayon suns and lopsided stick figures. Time hadn't touched it, but something had, because on the center of the bed, perfectly placed, was a single hair ribbon. Red. Silk. The kind Anna always wore. And beneath it a note. In my handwriting. She's still here. Keep the door closed. I dropped it. I never wrote that. At least I didn't remember writing it. I backed out of the room and closed the door again, not because I was afraid, but because it felt like I'd just walked in on something sleeping. Something that shouldn't be disturbed until it was ready. The next morning, I called Evelyn and asked her to come over. I need someone else to see it, I told her. To tell me I'm not going insane. She hesitated. I don't know, Claire. You sound tired. I am. But this is real. I opened the door. There was a long pause. Then she said, Fine. I'll come by tomorrow. I'll bring coffee. That night, I sat in my mother's old bedroom flipping through her journals. I hadn't dared open them before, not even after her funeral. But now, it felt necessary. The entries were mostly mundane. Recipes, doctor appointments, memories of me and Anna playing in the yard. But then, in a dated entry marked just 2 weeks before Anna's disappearance, I found this. She came back from the forest different. She doesn't laugh the same, she doesn't blink. And sometimes she hums to things that aren't there. Another entry 2 days later, I told Harold we should take her to a specialist. But he says children are just strange, that I'm imagining it. But I saw her eyes, those were not her eyes. Then finally, if she knocks on the door again, we won't answer. If she speaks, we won't reply. We keep the door locked. We keep the door locked. We keep the door locked. The phrase repeated over and over. The ink grew darker, messier, as if she was writing it under duress. I dropped the book. Evelyn arrived the next morning. I barely let her get a foot in the door before I was dragging her down the hallway. Claire, she said uneasy. You look like you haven't slept in days. I haven't. But I need you to see the room. I stopped in front of the door and took a breath. It was still unlocked. Still warm. I turned the knob and pushed. The room was empty. Exactly the way I had seen it. Unchanged. Familiar. But Evelyn didn't react. She just blinked. There's nothing unusual here, she said. It's dusty, sure, but... Claire, this just looks like a normal room. What about the drawings? The toy chest? The bed? Yeah, she said slowly. It's a child's bedroom. Her tone was that carefully measured one people use when they're talking to someone who's not well. I felt my mouth go dry. And the note, I asked. What note? I ran to the bed. Gone. The ribbon, too. I knelt searching, flipping over the pillow, shaking out the quilt. Nothing. Evelyn stepped back. Claire, I think maybe it's time to talk to someone. A professional? I looked at her, panicked. You think I'm losing it? I think you're grieving. And grief makes us see things we want to believe. I didn't imagine this, I said, my voice rising. There were letters, tapes, my mother's journal. Let me take you somewhere, she interrupted gently. Just to talk. 2 hours later, I sat across from a therapist I hadn't seen in years, Dr. Minette. She was kind, too kind, like she'd been briefed ahead of time. I told her everything, about the door, the voices, the letters. She listened with a patience that made me want to scream. Then she said, Claire, sometimes our minds protect us from trauma by rewriting reality, especially when we carry guilt. But what if the guilt isn't false? I asked. What if I did do something? What if I locked her in and forgot? She paused. Do you believe you hurt your sister? I don't know. And do you believe she's still in that room? I looked out of the window. I believe something is. When I got home that night, Evelyn was gone. She'd left a note on the counter. Please call me tomorrow. And please, Claire, don't stay here alone tonight. I crumpled it and threw it away. Because I had to be alone. Because I needed to hear it again. At 3:12 a.m., I sat outside the door. No light. No sound. Until breathing. Then a voice. But not Anna's. Lower. Male. Familiar somehow. It said she believed you. That's what made her mine. I stood. My throat tightened. My eyes burned with tears. What are you? I whispered. Silence. Then from the other side, the one you forgot. The next morning, I retrieved the cassette player from the trash. I hadn't wanted to touch it again. After what I'd heard on the first tape, my father's trembling voice, the way he whispered, "Don't let her out," before that scream, I'd thought burying it was enough. But something had changed. The voice I heard last night. It wasn't Anna's. It wasn't mine. It was his. The one who whispered to her. Who waited. And I needed to know if there was more. If that wasn't the only tape. My father kept everything in duplicate. Notes, wills, journals. It was part of his personality, obsessive, meticulous, afraid of forgetting. I returned to his study, opened the bottom drawer, and there it was, a second cassette, unlabeled, tucked beneath a folder marked Private Destroy After Death. But he hadn't destroyed it, he'd just hidden it, like all of us did with things we didn't understand. This time, I didn't hesitate. I plugged in the player, inserted the tape, pressed play. It began with static again, then a rustling as if someone were moving through fabric. Then my father's voice, quieter this time. Different. I've decided to record everything. Margaret thinks it's unnecessary. She doesn't understand what's growing in this house. It's not just her. He sighed. I watched Anna this morning. She was drawing again the spiral, over and over. Then she turned to me and said, "He says you're getting sick, Daddy." I asked her what that meant and she smiled. Not like her. More silence. Then footsteps. She was gone for 4 hours yesterday. Said she was in the forest. But her shoes were clean. Her clothes were dry. And when I asked her what she did out there, she said, a pause. A long, strained pause. She said, "I found my real family." I felt my stomach knot. I remembered that phase. Anna became obsessed with pretending we weren't her true family. We thought it was just play. But what if it wasn't? The tape clicked again. New section. She's not sleeping anymore. Neither are we. Margaret prays at night, but I don't think God is listening. Something in this house listens louder. A deep breath. Last night, I woke to find Anna standing in the hallway staring at the locked door, the one we used to store winter clothes. She was humming, rocking. When I asked what she was doing, she said, then on the tape, a second voice. "Waiting for you to stop pretending." I dropped the player. My blood ran cold. That voice, soft, gentle, but hollow, was Anna's. But not really. Not fully. There was something else in it. Like her words were being pulled out of her mouth by someone else. I replayed the section. Over and over. Waiting for you to stop pretending. The sound quality was degraded, distorted, but underneath it, just beneath the surface, there was another voice. Low. Whispering in a language I didn't know. Something ancient. Wet, like something being dragged across stone. I turned the volume up, pressed my ear closer. It whispered through Anna's words, timing itself to her breath. Then suddenly, loudly, "I am through waiting." I ripped the plug from the wall. The player went silent. My hands were shaking. I dropped to my knees and pressed my forehead to the floor, trying to breathe. That's when I saw it. A crack. Running beneath the desk. Hairline thin, like the house had been split in two. It hadn't been there before. I ran my finger over it. Cold. Smooth. Something about it made my fingertips tingle. And then, I heard it. Breathing. From beneath the floor. I called Evelyn again. She didn't answer. I left a message. "Evelyn, it's happening again. I found another tape. I need someone to confirm I'm not." I couldn't finish the sentence. I wasn't even sure what I wanted her to confirm anymore. That I wasn't crazy, or that the thing behind the door was real. That night, I refused to sit near the hallway. Instead, I locked myself in my bedroom and pushed the dresser in front of the door. Just in case. I don't know why I thought that would help. If it really wanted in, it wouldn't use the handle. Still, I watched the clock. At 3:12 a.m., I held my breath. Nothing. Then a soft knock. But not at my door. At the bedroom window. I froze. The window was on the second floor. The knock came again. Slower. Rhythmic. Knock. Pause. Knock. Pause. Like a heartbeat. I crept forward. Pulled the curtain aside. Nothing. Just the empty yard. The trees rustling in the dark. But etched into the outside of the glass fogged by condensation were 5 words written with a child's finger. She believed me. You didn't. The next morning, Evelyn showed up unannounced. She looked worried. Eyes puffy. No makeup. She held a grocery bag and a small recorder in one hand. I listened to the voicemail she said. You sounded not like you. I stepped aside and let her in. Come, I said. I have to show you something. I led her to the study, showed her the second tape, the crack in the floor, the marks on the window pane. She stayed silent the whole time. Finally, she whispered, Claire, this is beyond you. What do you mean? I mean, it was never just Anna. Was it? Evelyn's words didn't settle like comfort. They dropped like stones into my stomach. It was never just Anna. Was it? I stared at her, trying to understand. What are you saying? She glanced toward the hallway, then back to me. Her voice was barely a whisper. I think your mother knew. I think she chose not to stop it. I almost laughed, not out of humor, but desperation. My mother. She prayed over that room, slept with a Bible under her pillow. She also kept secrets, Evelyn said gently but firmly. You told me once she never let you clean her bedroom, that she kept it locked even when she was dying. I nodded. She said it was because of the pills, the mess, the shame. Evelyn shook her head. Or maybe because she was hiding something. We went upstairs together. I hadn't stepped into my mother's room since the day we cleared her things out after the funeral. The bed was still made like a hotel. The curtains were drawn and dust lingered in the air like smoke. Evelyn moved toward the dresser, opened each drawer slowly, methodically. Nothing unusual: clothes, expired cosmetics, old bank statements. Then she crouched down and ran her fingers along the baseboard behind the furniture. There was a gap, a panel uneven and slightly warped. She pulled. It stuck at first, then gave. Behind it was a narrow compartment. Inside, a small empty prescription bottle, a bundle of photographs, a key, and a journal bound in worn green leather. I reached for the journal. My name was etched on the inside cover. Not in a loving dedication, in small cramped writing. Not to me. About me. Claire doesn't remember. That's for the best. My hands trembled as I flipped through the entries. The first few were mundane. Lists. Frustrations about her health. Notes about the grocery budget. Then scattered between them, something darker began to appear. The entity is strongest when Claire and Anna are near each other. It listens through them. It mimics. It learns. He speaks to Anna, but it's Claire he wants. Always has been. Maybe because she resisted. Maybe because she saw through him. We did what we had to do. Claire can never remember the forest. She must believe she stayed home that day. I froze. What forest? I whispered. Evelyn looked at me sharply. You don't remember I never went with them. Anna did. I stayed behind. I had a fever or something. But even as I said it, something in my brain cracked. A splintered image. Trees. Shadows. Holding a stuffed bear in my arms. The feel of pine needles against my ankles. Laughter not mine. And a voice saying, if one comes willing and one comes afraid, I'll know who to take. The next journal entry confirmed it. The ritual needed 2. That's what the woman in the woods said. But we were too afraid to send them both. We told Claire she stayed home. We drugged her that night. We buried her memory. I told myself Anna could handle it, that she was strong, but she came back changed. And now it's all unraveling. I felt like my lungs had turned to ash. My parents had taken us both. To the forest. To something. Some ritual. Some pact. But when it came time to choose, they let Anna be taken. Not me. And then, they made me forget. I collapsed into the chair beside the bed. Evelyn sat across from me, holding the key we'd found in the drawer. "This isn't to the room," she said. "Is it I took it?" It was smaller than the bedroom key. Brass, with strange symbols etched into it. One of them, the spiral. "I think it's for the chest," I whispered. "The toy chest," I nodded. "The one in Anna's room." We descended the stairs in silence. The house seemed to hold its breath as we walked down the hallway toward the door I had feared for most of my life. I opened it. The warmth greeted us again. Everything looked the same, the books, the dolls, the cracked nightlight. The toy chest sat in the corner, innocent in appearance, pale blue chipped along the lid. I remembered hiding toys in there, secrets, even cookies I'd stolen. But now, it looked like a coffin. Evelyn handed me the key. I hesitated, then inserted it into the lock. It clicked. The lid creaked open. Inside, a thin folded blanket. A flashlight. A series of symbols carved into the wood. And something else. Something wrapped in linen tied with a leather string. I unwrapped it slowly. It was a mirror. Handheld antique, the glass blackened in the center. The moment I looked at it, I recoiled. Because the reflection wasn't mine. It was Anna's. But she was older. My age. And she was smiling. I dropped the mirror. It shattered across the chest's interior. Evelyn gasped. I stepped back. My heart thundering. The pieces glinted, and in each shard I saw her face. All of them smiling, watching, waiting. Then from behind us, the bedroom door closed itself with a quiet click. The light in the hallway flickered, and the whisper returned. Right behind my ear, she said you'd come back. I didn't scream. Not at first. The whisper was so close, so intimate, it was like it bypassed my ears and settled directly inside my skull. She said you'd come back. I turned sharply. No one. Just Evelyn standing near the bed, her face pale, her hands still clutching the broken mirror's cloth like it could protect her. "Did you hear that I asked?" She nodded slowly. "Yes." The word felt like a confession. It meant I wasn't alone in this. But it also meant it wasn't just in my head. We didn't speak for a few minutes. Just stood there, too stunned to process what had just happened. I gathered the mirror shards and placed them back in the chest piece by piece. Each one still shimmered faintly with Anna's face, or something pretending to be her. Evelyn placed her hand on my shoulder. "Claire, do you think this is still your sister?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe Anna had been trying all these years to reach me, that she'd been trapped, misunderstood, left behind. But something deeper whispered the truth I didn't want to admit. I think it was her once, but I don't know if it still is. That night, Evelyn insisted on staying. She took the guest room, but neither of us slept. The house felt different, charged like the walls were humming with breath. Like the air itself was pressing in. At 3:12 a.m., I sat upright in bed. Not from a sound, but from a pull. Like something calling silently from the hallway. Not with words, with gravity. I slipped out of bed, stepped softly into the hall. The door to Anna's room was closed, but the crack beneath it glowed faintly golden like candlelight. I approached, heart hammering. I reached for the knob. A voice Evelyn's called from behind me. "Claire." I turned. But it wasn't Evelyn. She was standing at the end of the hallway, and the voice had come from the other side of the door, mimicking her tone. A perfect echo. I backed away. The light beneath the door blinked out. Darkness again. The next morning, Evelyn packed her things. "I can't," she said, avoiding my eyes. I believe you now. But that's exactly why I have to leave. I didn't beg her to stay. She kissed my cheek before she left and said, "It wants you alone." After she was gone, the house got quieter, not peaceful, hollow. I thought I might finally have a moment to think, to read the rest of my mother's journal, to revisit the tapes, to make some kind of plan. But then the doorbell rang. It was the mailman. He handed me a small package. No return address. Inside was a birthday card, pink and glittery, with the words, "To my sister, always together." I opened it. Inside, a drawing. Two girls, one older, one younger, holding hands, standing in front of the house. The windows were blacked out, the sky above them streaked with red crayon. Beneath the drawing were 5 words in shaky handwriting. "Happy birthday, Claire. Come inside." It wasn't my birthday. Anna's birthday was in 5 days. But somehow, I knew this was a countdown. I burned the card in the sink. The ashes clung to the porcelain like they didn't want to let go. That night, I didn't wait for 3:12. At midnight, I walked through the house with a flashlight and the journal in hand. The entries had changed, not literally, but in how they felt. It wasn't just a record of fear anymore. It was a map. A story of a family slowly eaten alive from the inside by something they tried to hide. At the end, the last sentence, written in my mother's trembling hand, she brought it back with her. I didn't know if she meant Anna or me. At 2:58 a.m. I heard it. A knock. Not at the front door. Not at the bedroom. At the attic entrance. The attic I hadn't opened in years. I climbed the pull-down ladder with the flashlight clenched between my teeth, my breath sharp and shallow. The attic was cold, dry, still. But something was waiting for me. Not a figure, not a body. A gift. On the far end of the attic floor was a birthday cake. Perfect. Fresh. Vanilla. Frosted white with pink letters. "Welcome back." My knees buckled. I crawled to it. The smell was real. Sweet. Warm. Beside it was a doll, Anna's favorite. The one she lost weeks before she vanished. It was clean. Dressed. Eyes staring. And on the doll's dress was a note. 1 word, tomorrow. I stumbled back down the ladder. My mouth was dry. My legs shaking. At the bottom of the stairs, I looked into the living room and froze. All the lights were on. Every one. I hadn't touched a switch. And in the center of the floor stood Anna, or something wearing her shape. She stood barefoot in the center of my living room. Her head was tilted just slightly to the side, like she was trying to figure out what I'd become. Her hair was darker than I remembered, longer, but her face, God, her face. It was Anna's almost. The dimples were there, the soft chin, the gap between her front teeth that had never quite closed. But her eyes, no, those were not Anna's eyes. They were too deep, too still. Not a flicker of warmth behind them. Like someone had hollowed out my sister's face and stuffed it with something else. "Anna," I whispered. She smiled. "Happy early birthday," she said. Her voice was so close, but it echoed just slightly, like it had traveled too far to reach me, like it had bounced off too many walls. "I missed you," she added. She stepped forward. I didn't move. Couldn't. My hands were ice, my mouth filled with the copper taste of fear. "How are you here?" I asked. She blinked slowly. "You let me out." I backed toward the hallway. My legs were trembling so badly I could barely move. She followed, calm, pacing herself, like a shadow in a slow dance. "I waited," she said. "You promised you'd come back. And you did. I never promised I stopped. Because maybe I had. In some forgotten childhood game. In some dream. Or maybe in that moment when I left her behind." She raised her hand slowly and held up something small and dark between 2 fingers. A cassette tape. My stomach turned. "Where did you get that?" I asked. She laughed, light and childlike. Daddy said you'd ask. He said you wouldn't believe until the last one. She dropped the tape on the floor. It landed with a plastic thud. Play it, she said. Then we'll finish the party. Then she turned and walked straight through the hallway wall. Vanished. I didn't pick the tape up right away. I stood there for a long time, the silence of the house pressing against my ears like static. I expected the lights to flicker the air to shift something dramatic, but nothing happened. The only thing left behind was that damn cassette. I finally bent down and picked it up. No label, but I already knew who had recorded it. Back in my father's study, I plugged in the cassette player and slid the tape inside. It hissed. Then his voice filled the room. Tired. Broken. Barely more than a whisper. This is for Claire. If you found this, it means she's come back. Not Anna. She. The thing in her skin. I leaned closer, my breath shallow. Your mother couldn't bear the truth. Neither could I. But you always saw things too clearly. That's why we chose you. That's why it was supposed to be you. But Anna begged. She offered herself. She said she'd protect you. And I let her. My whole body went cold. He continued. I made a deal. We did. All of us. The woman in the forest promised safety, in exchange for one child every 20 years. But the child had to be given, not taken. So we gave Anna. She became the door, the one who watches, the one who waits. He paused. I heard the sound of him crying. Something wet, heavy. You were supposed to forget. But you didn't. Not really. You carried her like a scar. Now that scar is waking up. And it's hungry. The tape ended with a sound I can't explain. It wasn't a scream. It was relief and finality. Like a soul collapsing. I sat in that study for what felt like hours. My father had offered his daughter to save our family. And now something wearing her face had returned. To collect. The next few days passed in a blur. I barely slept. Barely ate. I'd lost Evelyn. She'd stopped returning my calls. My son still hadn't replied. I was alone again. Except I wasn't. She was always near now. I'd find the faucet dripping pink. The fridge door opened to reveal nothing but melted ice and a child's drawing taped inside. I'd hear humming through the vents. Crayon spirals would appear on the walls overnight, even though I'd painted over them again and again. And the mirror. Every mirror in the house now showed her, standing behind me, smiling. On the eve of her birthday, I sat in the living room, waiting. Not at 3:12 a.m. Not anymore. Because tonight, she set the time. And when the clock struck midnight, the door to Anna's room swung wide on its own. The light inside glowed golden again. Warm. Inviting. I walked toward it. The toy chest was open. Inside was a party hat, a cupcake, a candle already lit, and another note. One more step and we'll all be together again. I looked down at the chest, at the shadows it cast too deep for its size, too dark for its light. Something moved inside, something small, something breathing. I didn't want to look inside the toy chest. Not because I feared what was in it, but because I feared what I'd remember once I saw it. The memories were circling me now, scratching at the edges, waiting for the right moment to pounce. But the note, one more step and we'll all be together again. Together. Like that was a good thing. Like it was a reward. I knelt slowly and peered inside. The candle flickered. The shadows shifted. And there, at the very bottom beneath the cupcake and the party hat, was something I hadn't seen since I was a child. A stuffed bear. Brown. Missing one button eye. Stitches coming undone at the paws. My bear. The one I swore I'd lost on a camping trip when I was 7. The one I cried over for weeks. The one I had forgotten. Until now. And then all at once it hit me. We had gone to the forest. All of us, Mom, Dad, Anna, and me. But it wasn't a picnic. It was an offering. The memory broke through like sunlight through ice. Anna had been wearing yellow. I remember because she hated that dress. Said it made her look like a banana. I was holding the bear. We were led into the woods by someone I didn't recognize. A woman in a gray cloak face hidden beneath a shawl. She didn't speak. Just walked, and we followed. Anna clung to my hand. We were both scared, but she tried to be brave for me. She always did. We reached a clearing. At the center, a ring of stones, ancient, moss-covered. Our parents stood on either side, silent. The woman pointed at us. One stays, one returns. I dropped the bear. Anna stepped forward. She didn't hesitate. In the memory, I screamed. I ran to her, clutched her arm. But she looked back at me and smiled a real, human, terrified smile. "It's okay," she said. "You're not ready." The woman placed her hand on Anna's head. And then, nothing. Blackness. Back in the present, I stumbled away from the chest, clutching the bear in my arms. I had been there. I had watched her go. And I had let them erase it. The truth sat on my chest like a boulder. Anna didn't vanish. She was given. And I was the one they spared. I sat on the floor of the room, rocking slightly, the bear in my lap. She had protected me, and now she wanted me to remember. Or maybe it wasn't her anymore. The hallway lights dimmed. The room darkened. And from the chest, a sound rose, slow and guttural. Breathing, followed by laughter. Not a child's, not Anna's. Something older. Something that had borrowed her voice long enough to lure me back. I stood and backed away slowly. The door to the room slammed shut behind me. I was trapped. I reached for the doorknob, hot to the touch. From behind me, something moved. I turned. The bed was empty. The mirror on the wall cracked clean through. But in its reflection, Anna stood behind me. Only she wasn't quite right. Her skin too pale, her mouth too wide. And her voice, when she spoke, came from underneath the floorboards. "You forgot me, Claire. But I never forgot you." I screamed. Not because I was afraid, because I was guilty. Because some part of me had always known this day would come, and because I wasn't sure if I was mourning her, or mourning the part of me that had already started to become her. The mirror shattered, not from impact but from pressure, from something unseen pushing through from the other side. The cracks spiderwebbed outward, and in the center her eye stared back at me. Not blinking, not human, not Anna. I backed against the wall, my breath sharp, my knees locking. The air in the room had thickened again, turned syrupy with heat, but underneath it was a pulse, steady, ancient, like the house itself was alive. Then the lights went out. I don't remember moving to the floor, but I was there, curled beside the toy chest, the stuffed bear still clutched in my hands like a talisman. I whispered Anna's name again and again. "Anna, please, come back." Somewhere beneath me, the house groaned. And from inside the floor, just beneath the planks, a second voice answered. It wasn't her name. It wasn't even a word. It was a noise like air being pulled through teeth, a wet, rattling breath. And then a whisper that wasn't a whisper at all. "She's not alone." The floor beneath the bed rippled. Wood bent like softened wax. Something pushed against it from below, slow, deliberate. I scrambled to the door and threw it open. But the hallway was no longer empty. At the far end stood Anna. She was 13 again, dressed in that yellow dress she hated, and standing behind her in her shadow was something tall, thin. Its limbs too long, its head tilted, a grin etched across its face like a gash. The hallway lights flickered. She reached out a hand. "Come see," she said. I ran. I didn't stop. I tore through the kitchen, out the back door, into the yard, barefoot and breathless. The air outside was sharp with dew. But even out here, the house loomed behind me like a living thing, watching, waiting. Then I heard it. Laughter. Children's laughter. I turned. Anna stood by the tree line, just at the edge of the woods. She was older now, my age. Her hair tangled, her dress new. She wasn't glowing. She wasn't shadowed. She was sad. I waited, she said. I know, I said back. My voice cracked. I forgot. She looked down at the stuffed bear in my hands. You left him. I didn't mean to. I know. She stepped closer. And for a moment, just one moment, I believed it really was her. But then I saw her eyes. Still hollow. Still full of someone else. Behind her, the trees moved. Not with wind, with shape. Something darker than the night itself stood just beyond the branches, watching, breathing, smiling. Him. The one from the forest. The one from the journal. The one who'd taken Anna's shape and her voice and her memory and worn them like a mask. He wasn't haunting the house. He'd become it. I fell to my knees in the grass, hands over my ears. And then, silence. When I looked up, she was gone. The house was still. The forest still. And the only thing in front of me was the stuffed bear. Eyes stitched shut. Mouth sewn closed. And a note pinned to its chest, you remembered. She's almost free. I didn't go back inside that night. I sat in the backyard until dawn. When the sun rose, I opened the front door. The house felt different. Like something had been broken. Or maybe released. I made coffee. Fed the cat I didn't have anymore. Pretended for a little while that the world was normal. But upstairs in Anna's room, the door was open. And inside the toy chest, the mirror was whole again. I didn't touch the mirror. Not at first. It sat in the chest like it had never shattered, not a single crack in the glass. The linen wrapping was gone. The light in the room seemed to bend toward it. But what truly stopped me was this. The mirror wasn't reflecting the room. It was showing the forest. I knelt in front of it, breath catching in my throat. I could see trees swaying gently, a circle of moss-covered stones, the same clearing from my memory. But something was wrong. The trees moved too slowly, the shadows fell upward instead of down, and in the middle of it all was a girl in yellow. Anna. She was seated cross-legged at the center of the stone ring, humming softly to herself. I leaned closer, and then she turned her head and looked directly at me. Her mouth moved in the mirror, though I heard no sound. I tried to read her lips, but the words didn't make sense. They weren't meant for me. Behind her, the trees parted. He stepped forward, the tall, thin figure, the one I had seen in shadow and reflection, in glimpses through time and memory. But now I saw him fully. No eyes, no mouth. A smooth face stretched too tightly across a frame made for something else. He wore no clothes, but his skin rippled like it was made of wax. Beneath it, movement. And then he spoke. Not through the mirror, through the room, through the walls, the floor, the air. You broke the pact. I stumbled back. What do you want? I asked. His voice followed me. A replacement. The lights in the room dimmed. The air changed, tasted like wet stone, like iron and salt. I stepped toward the mirror again, heart pounding. Anna was still sitting in the forest, staring at me. Then her lips moved again. It has to be given. Behind me, the floor creaked. I turned. She was there. Anna, 13 again, smiling, but only her face smiled. The rest of her was stiff, unmoving. You can come now, she said. I don't understand, I whispered. Yes, you do. She moved closer, not walking, gliding, as if the room bent around her. You were meant to be the door, she said, and I was meant to be the key. She raised her hand, and in it was a spiral-shaped charm, the same symbol from her drawings, from the journal, from the tapes. The pact can be reset, she said, but only if you give it freely. I felt the cold of the room seep into my bones. If I say yes? What happens? She smiled wider. You'll remember everything. And if I say no. The light behind her flickered. The shape in the mirror leaned forward. She didn't answer. But the house did. A groan from the walls. A shriek from the pipes. The door to the hallway slammed shut without wind. You made me wait, she said, voice colder now. You forgot me. I was a child, I whispered. So was I, she snapped. And then quietly, but I still chose you. The charm burned in her hand, now glowing faintly. I looked back at the mirror. Anna in the forest was fading, but someone else was rising behind her, the figure taller now, its limbs spreading like roots. I backed away. No, I said. I'm not giving anyone. Her expression twisted. It has to be given, she said again. He can't take. He can only accept. That's the rule. I didn't write the rules. You did, she hissed, when you let them take me. The mirror began to rattle. The spiral on the charm pulsed with each heartbeat, hers or mine, I couldn't tell. Then she stepped forward and held out the charm. This is your last chance, she said. Reset the pact. Trade places. Come into the woods. And in that moment I saw her, truly saw her. Her eyes shimmered just for a second with the girl I'd known, the real Anna, still trapped, still waiting, somewhere behind the mask. But the thing in front of me wasn't her. Not anymore. And I couldn't trust it. I reached out slowly, took the charm, held it in my palm, and then I closed my fist around it and threw it into the mirror. The glass cracked again violently with a sound like bone snapping underwater. The forest vanished. The figure behind her screamed. Anna's form flickered, glitched, and then collapsed into nothing. The room went dark. Silence. Then a whisper. You'll never forget again. I don't remember collapsing, but when I opened my eyes, I was lying on the floor of Anna's room. The mirror was shattered again, this time beyond repair. Not a single shard reflected anything but the broken wood beneath it. The toy chest was closed. The birthday cupcake, the party hat, all gone. Even the warmth in the air had faded. It was as if the room had finally let go. But I knew better. Because the charm, the spiral symbol Anna had held, was still burning a slow circle into the center of my palm. It hadn't vanished with the mirror. It had chosen me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the fractured glass across the floor. My head throbbed. My throat was raw. I felt hollowed out, like something inside me had shifted position. The silence in the house wasn't comforting, it was waiting, holding its breath. Because I hadn't ended anything. Not yet. That's when I heard the front door open, and close. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. Then a voice. Mom, Evan. My son. I rushed out of the room, down the stairs. My heart surged with relief, terror both. He stood in the foyer, keys in hand, a confused expression on his face. I got your messages, he said. I thought I'd come see for myself. He looked around the house. It had changed. I knew it. He could feel it too. Why are all the lights off? He asked. I opened my mouth to speak, to warn him, to tell him to run, that it wasn't safe. But then I saw it. Behind him. At the edge of the hallway. Her. Anna. Wearing the same yellow dress. Barefoot. Her face just out of focus, like a memory I couldn't quite hold. She didn't look at me. She looked at him. And smiled. Evan, I whispered, go outside. Right now. His brows knit. What? Why, please? I begged. Please just... Anna stepped forward, still smiling, still silent. The hallway darkened around her like it was collapsing into her shadow. Evan didn't see her. Couldn't. He was staring at me. Mom, you're scaring me. I know, I whispered. But you need to leave. Right now. And then Anna spoke. We don't need him. I turned furious. Leave him out of this. She didn't move. She just tilted her head. The same tilt as that thing behind her in the woods. That thing that wore her skin. It's you. Or someone else. That's the rule. My son looked between us, pale now. He whispered, "Who are you talking to?" I met her eyes. Then I made my decision. I ran to the hallway cabinet and grabbed the last item from my father's study, the iron-bound book of symbols he never let us touch. The one I'd avoided for years. Inside it somewhere was the ritual he never used. To bind. Not to reset. Not to give. But to seal. I flipped through the pages with shaking hands until I found it. The offering refused. The ink was faded but readable. The spiral symbol repeated 3 times. A drop of blood, an object of memory, a mirror shard, and a choice. I had them all. I placed the stuffed bear on the ground, cut my palm with a shard of the mirror, let the blood drip onto the page. Anna stepped back. Her face flickered. Behind her, the hallway trembled, the walls groaned, the lights buzzed and popped. "He won't like this," she whispered. "I don't care." I began reading the words aloud. They weren't English. They weren't even sound, not really. They were like pulling bones from my throat. The room grew darker. The hallway folded in on itself. Anna screamed high and shrill and childlike and ancient. The air collapsed around me. Then silence. When I opened my eyes, she was gone. The hallway was empty. And the bear was burned. Evan helped me up. He didn't ask questions. He didn't have to. Somehow he knew. Maybe that was part of it. Maybe that's what Anna meant by "you'll never forget again." The memory had passed into him too. The scar. The pact. The truth. It's been 3 weeks since that night. The house is quieter now. Too quiet. Not the suffocating kind that presses against your chest, no. This silence is listening. A silence that waits, that watches, that remembers. Like the house itself is catching its breath. But the door to Anna's room hasn't moved. Not once. The mirror shards have dulled. The toy chest is empty. And for the first time in 20 years, I've started sleeping with my bedroom light off. You might think that means it's over. But it's not. The burn mark in the hallway never faded. A perfect spiral blackened into the wood. It won't scrub out. Won't bleach. It's a scar now. The house is or mine, I don't know. Evan hasn't asked about it, but he walks around it carefully like something instinctive tells him not to step inside it. I haven't told him everything. Only what I could say without losing him again. He doesn't need to carry what I carry. But sometimes I catch him staring at the hallway, just listening. And once, only once, he whispered, "Did she forgive you?" I didn't answer. Because I don't know. Sometimes in dreams I see her. Anna. Not the flickering thing that wore her face, but her. Barefoot, older, standing at the edge of the forest with her hands in her pockets, and the same mischievous grin she always had before doing something she wasn't supposed to. She never says anything. She just looks at me, with sorrow, and something like peace. I went back to the clearing once. The moss-covered stones are still there, half buried now. The trees don't whisper anymore. The light doesn't bend. But I placed a candle in the center and lit it. For her. For me. For what we survived. And what we didn't. The truth is this. My sister gave herself to protect me. And I forgot. But she never did. She waited. Through the noise, through the silence, through every closed door and shadowed room. She waited for me to remember. To choose. To finally face what our family tried so desperately to bury. And now that I have, I carry her with me. Not as a ghost. Not as a wound. But as a voice that no longer cries from behind a locked door. A voice that finally rests. If you've made it this far, thank you. This wasn't just a story. It was a confession. A reckoning. A memory clawing its way back from the dark. Some doors once opened can't be closed again. But maybe they shouldn't be. Have you ever remembered something you weren't supposed to tell me? In the comments below, I'm listening. And if you felt something while hearing this, if you heard echoes of your own locked room, please like, subscribe, and share this story. There are more truths waiting to be told. Right here on Grace's Truth.